So, hello.
Hi there.
So, I'll tell you a little bit about myself.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, so I'm Laura Standley. I am an associate professor of theater at MCLA, Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts. We're
Okay.
a small liberal arts school in the Berkshires, which is in this area of Massachusetts that's full of all sorts of great art institutions. We have Mass MoCA, which is the biggest contemporary art museum that's like quite literally right down the street from me right now. And then I have Williamstown Theater Festival, Barrington Stage, Berkshire Theater Group, Shake and Co. There's just like tons of theater. So it's a small town. It sort of has this feeling of vacation land, but it's also a good place to be as a theater artist, and a good place for students to kind of um, launch a theater career. So um, my research is in physical theater forms
Okay.
and using dance choreography techniques for staging. And I started acting at Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park when I was, oh my goodness, I believe I was a sophomore in college. And my first show was Twelfth Night. And I was directed by Catherine, and I ended up doing a lot of shows while I was in college. And then I left, and I got my bachelor's in theater at University of Central Oklahoma, and then I went to UC Irvine, and that's where I got my master's in acting.
Okay.
And then I moved to New York, and I worked as a professional actress for about 10 years. And I helped start a theater company there, and um, worked with all kinds of different big regional theater companies. And really became more interested in mm, in academic theater because I was really interested in pushing boundaries and doing innovative work, and I just couldn't do that as um, if I was just sort of focusing on being a professional actress.
Mhm.
And so I really wanted to find a group of people that wanted to work the way that I wanted to work, because I discovered when I was working on a production of Tartuffe with Paul Mullins, who's worked with City Company, and he introduced me to Barney O'Hanlon with City Company, and I did a show with them that was completely working with viewpoints. And at that point, I was like, I don't want to do this other thing anymore. This like show up to rehearsal, do some table work, stage as quick as you can, do a play thing. I'm just not interested in it anymore. Um, and so what I've been doing is really pursuing ways that I can kind of push the envelope about the way we make theater. Um, and let's see, I started directing with Oklahoma Shakespeare. Catherine asked me to come direct a show. I think it's about 6 years now ago. And so I've done a lot of things with OSP since then. Scenes from an Execution by Howard Barker, or I did Sense and Sensibility. And then most recently, I directed The Three Sisters that was over Zoom with Oklahoma Shakespeare. So yes, that's me. And I teach here. I teach acting, and I teach really all levels of acting, including Shakespeare. And our acting classes here are integrated acting, voice, and movement classes. So because movement is my thing, it's my jam, I kind of bring it to everything that I do. So uh, one of the things that we do in our intermediate acting classes, we learn contact improvisation. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a contemporary dance technique that involves lifting and falling.
Interesting.
So yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Who did you play in Twelfth Night?
I was Maria.
Oh, okay.
I was Maria. I was young for Maria, but
Mhm.
Catherine cast me anyway.
I have played Sebastian twice.
Oh, really? I
Wow,
love this night.
it's so fun. It's probably one of my favorites of Shakespeare's work.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I love 12th Night and As You Like It are my two sort of top. I just, yeah, I think I could direct those over and over again and I would be happy.
Mhm.
Hey, here's another thing about me is that it was somewhere in my like mid 30s that my brain kind of shifted and I just wasn't, it's not that I'm not interested in acting anymore. I do consider myself an actress and I always will consider myself an actress, but I just started becoming much more interested in thinking about the whole thing.
Yeah, from like a holistic standpoint instead of.
Yeah. And when I was your age, I didn't expect that to happen. So it just kind of it just sort of evolved that way.
Something that you said about your field of research, where you're talking about implementing dance techniques when staging plays, really resonated with me because not 2 weeks ago I finished like a first or second draft of this 10-minute play that I wrote. That it's a series of monologues about the Oregon wildfires,
Oh wow.
and it's monologues set over top of modern dance on stage.
That's great. That's
And I thought that was really interesting. So I would love to talk to you about that.
absolutely. I just finished I just finished doing in the so I was on sabbatical and then before that I did a production of Sweet Charity where we collaboratively choreographed the whole thing together with all of the actors.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, and so I mean, I've worked in a bunch of different ways using actors to sort of collaboratively choreograph things.
Mhm.
There's a there's a variety of formats that you can use. Um, I'm trained in viewpoints. So have you worked in viewpoints?
I haven't. No, I've heard a lot about it, but
So viewpoints, I mean, all of these things have one thing in common, which is that you really are trying to pay attention to moving first rather than thinking through the psychology of a character and that sort of causing the movement. Um, so, so viewpoints tends to, when you look at it, it's a lot of sort of groups of people kind of moving in space together. So it doesn't have a lot of shapes to it. It can, but it really becomes about the actors discovering um, how they can take advantage of time, I guess, and how they operate in space in
okay.
that. But then, so like contact improvisation is really partnering work. It brings the two actors together and it has them listening to each other's bodies and really taking each other's weight. So you see lots of weight exchange going on in contact improv.
Okay.
Um, and then I worked with Frantic Assembly in London. Now, Frantic Assembly, they're the ones that did the choreography for Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
Yes. Okay.
And so one of the main reasons that I wanted to work with them was because I knew they used a whole series of lifts that I didn't know how to use. And I wanted, I kept asking, is there going to be a lift workshop anywhere anytime soon? And
Mhm.
nobody does them. In fact, that could be something that when COVID is over, I could maybe do. But I was really interested in these big lifts, these sort of group lifts, and so they use those. But the other thing that I learned about working with them is that a lot of their movement is kind of task based movement. So they'll come up with like a series of moves that are based on in fact, I think I can admit this person. So I just did. So joining us, hello, hello. So anyway, we're working on a series of moves that are based on a kind of a theme that is a task, like catching is a task. Hello, hi, welcome, welcome. We were just chatting here about one of the major sort of ways that I focus my research is on dance choreography techniques in staging. And so I was talking about that. So for example, you could come up with a whole sequence that's based on catching, and you could you could work in the areas of space, like in the directions. And so it all becomes this. And then you can kind of teach those movements to a partner. And then you and the partner could catch together. You could catch each other, things like that. So there's I'm interested in all the different kinds of ways. Another thing that I do is trying to come up with movement that sort of reminds me of shapes in space. It's another thing. So lots of different fun. Each method has a different quality of movement that comes from it. But why don't I shift into Michael Chekhov technique? How much do you all know about Michael Chekhov? A little bit.
Yeah, I've worked some with it, but not a whole lot.
No more of the Anton Chekhov than Michael Chekhov.
Right.
But I am familiar. I am familiar with it.
A little bit, yeah. Well, so I mean, most people have heard of Michael Chekhov as being the nephew of Anton Chekhov, and maybe they've heard of psychological gesture. That's another thing that I tend to hear from people. Nick, have you taken any classes in Michael Chekhov technique at school yet?
So OU doesn't have like a single class in Chekhov. We have something that's called master teachers. So where it's like for like 3 weeks out of a semester, we have like rotating professors that do like work with it. So I have some part of a class with Michael Chekhov.
So some of these things might be familiar and some of them maybe not. I mean, we're only going to work here for a little bit, and we're working online in our rooms, and it is what it is. But
I don't remember if Michael Chekhov was or if I'm confusing him with someone else, that the emotion follows the action.
I think he would probably classify himself in that movement first, then emotion happens category. Sure. Yeah, one of the things that I find really interesting about Michael Chekhov is that he was exiled from Russia, and when that happened, Russia literally wiped his existence out of their papers. And he was not listed in their records for 50 years. So it wasn't until the fall of the Berlin Wall that people in Russia could even bring his name up without being afraid that they were going to have a knock on their door from the KGB. So I find that really interesting. And I've been talking to my students about this a lot because I've also been looking into a director that was sort of considered one of Stanislavski's kind of the other side of the coin of Stanislavski at the Moscow Art Theater, which was Meyerhold, because Michael Chekhov loved Meyerhold, and he really he really admired Meyerhold, and I think was quite influenced by him. But Meyerhold ended up being executed for the way he directed plays. which I don't think people talk about a lot. And so, you know, I've been thinking a lot about the impact of art these days, and thinking about how subversive these people were for the way that they taught. So we'll talk a little bit about this, but I bring that up because part of the reason that a lot of people don't immediately teach Michael Chekhov right off the top of their head is because of this. Michael Chekhov wasn't taught in the States until the mid-90s. And it was my experience that I went to UC Irvine for graduate school, and I was introduced to Michael Chekhov in my last graduate movement class, mostly because my movement teacher had felt that the particular group of us had kind of moved past the normal curriculum. And she was like, you guys don't need to do what I normally do. And so I'm wondering if you are interested in exploring this book, To the Actor, with me. To the Actor is Michael Chekhov's major book. And so we all said, sure. I had heard of psychological gesture, but I didn't know anything about it. And so what we ended up doing was basically taking his exercises and kind of laying the book out on the floor, and she would read the exercises out of the book and we would do them. And it was life-changing for me. I ended up writing my thesis on it. So as a young actor, he studied with Stanislavski. And Stanislavski said that Michael Chekhov was his most gifted acting student. He was actually, there's this famous anecdote about how Michael Chekhov was doing that effective memory exercise where you come up with, you sort of stage the worst day of your life. I don't know if you've ever done that. You stage the worst day of your life. I'm not really interested in staging the worst day of my life, by the way. I just think that that's not, no. But anyway, Michael Chekhov apparently did the exercise and everybody was just blown away. And then Stanislavski said, did that really happen? And Michael Chekhov said, no, I made it all up. So he was really kind of pushing on Stanislavski's ideas, and near the end of his time in Russia, he actually had a nervous breakdown, which apparently was brought on by him experimenting with Stanislavski's effective memory exercises. And he ended up, after that nervous breakdown, never using them again. And he's quoted as saying, I want to teach you a technique that will offer you madness that you can walk away from. I like that. So
is that Chekhov or
that was Chekhov. I want to teach you madness that you can walk away from. Yeah. So Chekhov was influenced after this nervous breakdown. He found out about Rudolf Steiner, and he was studying Eastern philosophy. And that was ultimately what led to his downfall in Russia, because he was talking about the spiritual side and the mind-body connection in ways that Russia just wasn't really ready for. So in 1927, he was told that he had 36 hours to leave the country or he would be executed. And so he left, and he ended up traveling a lot, and he was basically searching for a place that would let him stay, let him immigrate. And so he went first to Germany, and he sort of follows the track of World War II. He goes to Germany, and then shit gets terrible in Germany, and he leaves. And he goes to France, and shit gets terrible in France. And then he goes to Italy, and then it's bad, and then Latvia, Lithuania, and then finally he goes to the UK. And things are calm there for a little bit, so he starts a school. And then World War II breaks out in the UK, and he goes to Connecticut. And he starts a school in Connecticut, and Yul Brynner is one of the students there. And then Yul Brynner is drafted, and all the men in the school are drafted in World War II. And so then he goes to Hollywood, and he ends up in Hollywood for the rest of his life. And he ended up doing 11 movies, and he came into contact with a lot of different 20th century acting influencers like Max Reinhardt and Alfred Hitchcock. And he was in Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound, and he actually won an Academy Award for that. And then the first version of his book was to the actor, like I said, and then he died 2 years later of a heart attack. He was just having dinner with his wife, and then he just died. So, you know, that's another part of why we didn't really learn much about him. Not only is he not being talked about by any of the Russians because they're afraid they're going to get killed, or, you know, silenced by the state in whatever way, but he also, you know, he just can't find a home. And so then he finally goes to Hollywood, and things are sort of settling down, and then he has a heart attack and dies. It's a sad story. But the people that I have worked with, so in 1997, an organization was started called the Michael Chekhov Organization, and they started teaching his work. And so I started working with the Michael Chekhov Organization, and it's through them that I was able to study with teachers that had actually studied with him, actually in his living room in Hollywood. And so his system works like a series of tools that each one of them kind of provides you a door into the technique. When we look at the overall effect of the system, his tools all focus on one thing, and that is the movement of the body. Chekhov said, "The moment you're not alive on stage, you're dead." And anyone who's acted can understand that. You know, for those of us who continue to act, we've all experienced that feeling, right? It drives us. We're constantly looking to feel alive on stage again, right? And then we also know that horrible dread of feeling like we're dead on stage, right? So he described his system as a series of tools that were like one of those circuit exhibits that you'd see at maybe a science center, where you have like all the light bulbs on a board, and then there's a hand crank, and you crank it, and then all the light bulbs light up at once. I've also seen where you can like jump up and down and turn all the lights on in a series circuit that way. So in Chekhov's system, he's beginning with movement as the place to train the body. And it has to do with that energy that we exert that goes into that something happening. You know, when we talk about training the body, we're talking about all sorts of things. Like, I mean, obviously we're talking about stamina, right? We want to train our body to be able to get through the 2 hours traffic of the stage. I mean, it really is a workout if you're on stage for a long time. But it's also, we're training flexibility and strength, but we're also training our awareness of our instrument, right? We want to be able to design how we move, and we want to be able to control the speed of what we're doing, and, you know, like for how long we move, or when we move, right? We also want to ask questions like, how much space do I occupy, right? And then what kind of boundaries does nature give me, and what kind of boundaries do I assert on my own physical presence? And then what kind of boundaries do I put on my psychophysical presence? Psychophysical, is, do you know what that means? Psychophysical? Have you ever heard that? It's the term.
Yeah, I haven't heard. I was going to say I haven't heard it, but I could like deduce it from psycho.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about that connection, right? It's about the idea that the way we move is deeply affected to the way we feel, deeply connected to the way we feel, and deeply connected to the way we see ourselves. So that idea of working psychophysically, working in the way that it's all connected, that's Chekhov was deeply interested in that idea. In this idea that the mind and the body are connected. So as an actor, our instrument is our body. And, you know, when we're thinking about what a character goes through in the course of a play, we might not just need to be interested in the emotions that the character goes through. It might be that it's possible to access a character's emotional life through your body. So let's see here. Hold on a second. What? I have these notes that I'm working on and it's just stuck. Let's see here. It's going to take me a minute. So, wonder what happened to that. Well, I have this thing. I have to open something else. So I thought that I would introduce you to some of these tools, some of the tools that are kind of the light bulbs that kind of lead you into Chekhov's work. And you can explore these with really any amount of space. And really, I've been working with my students online, and you know, we've all been kind of working with, or we've got any clothes that we've got on. It doesn't matter as long as it's comfortable. But you want to just find yourself a place in your space that you can stand on your own. And you want to just let me just move this here. All right, so find yourself a place in your space that you can just stand on your own. And just your feet pelvis width apart and your head gently lifting up. And these exercises really, like, it doesn't even matter if you want to, you don't have to focus on being framed in your camera. It's just about really more listening to my voice. So standing feet pelvis width apart, head gently lifting up, and your shoulders are back. Your arms are attached to your shoulders, yet free and easy. And your legs are strong, supported by gravity, yet free and easy. Allow yourself to breathe. You can allow your abdomen to fall forward. You can soften your focus using that way of looking that we sometimes call soft focus, where you're just sort of using your peripheral vision, a way of looking without looking, or really just seeing everything that's around you and not focusing on one particular thing. And you can soften your knees. And just think about this. Let's think about this for a moment. Be alone. Be alone with yourself. Feel what it feels like to be alone. Now be with someone. Be with someone, maybe one of these frames on your computer. Send your energy out to maybe one of these frames on your computer, one of these other people. And now be with all of us here connecting on the computer. Send your energy out to all of these people that have connected here over Zoom. And now be with all of us and anybody else in your house or in your building or maybe out on the street. Send your energy out to all those people. You can see them in your mind. Be with them. Be with everyone. Now be alone. Now let that go. And just notice how you feel different. What's the same? What's different? And just catalog that for a moment. Just catalog that. You can ask yourself, what happened? And just note that down for yourself. And maybe we'll come back to it. So Michael Chekhov asks you to be aware of certain fundamental principles. One of them is energy. One of them is energy. So energy being the force that moves the body, right? The force that moves the body. Nothing moves without energy. Energy supports life. It supports movement. Energy is formless. We know that it's there. The human body is a conduit of energy, right? So normally I would do an exercise with you that has to do with tossing a ball, a tennis ball or a hacky sack. And actually, it's interesting. Michael Chekhov exercises tend to involve throwing hacky sacks or tennis balls or some sort of thing. We do a lot of throwing. But what I'm going to do is introduce you to just the idea of throwing something. And we'll just play around with that. So there are many ways to move. There are many ways to perceive movement. It starts and stops. It has a sort of falling and becoming. It lifts. And then, when we are tossing a ball, right? I know that I need a certain energy to lift a ball through the air, right? I have to bring a certain energy to that. I also know that it takes some energy to breathe, right? My own breath is that sort of in and out of life is movement, and energy is happening with that. So this is one of the first fundamental principles that Michael Chekhov technique talks about. And energy can be a sort of esoteric thing. I can't draw you a picture of what it is, but you know that it's there when it's not there. The second thing has to do with the way we can describe this energy. And various teachers that teach the Michael Chekhov technique call this various things. But basically, so we have energy, and then we want to be able to describe the energy within our body. And this concept can be difficult at first for people that are used to rationalizing things. but you know, like I said, we know when we look at a body and it's not alive, we know that it's not alive. Something is missing. And, you know, we'll say the life force is gone, or, you know, the person's soul is gone, right? Versus when we look at a live person and we know that something is happening. Even when they're not still, they're moving, right? So, and there's nothing really spiritual about this. It's really quite objective. It just is. There is a movement that is happening, and great actors harness this on stage, and we know it when we see it, right? Eastern philosophy has a name for it. You know, we call it prana, we call it chi. Rudolf Steiner, who Chekhov studied his work, called it the etheric body. My teacher has started calling it the life body. And I like that. I think that can be an effective way to talk about this tangible thing that's inside us. So this next exercise is going to introduce you to this idea. And it's something that I can talk about, but until you try it, you really won't. You just got to try it. So let's stand. Feet on the floor, make contact with the floor, and experience what that is, right? Experience that support. And you can say to yourself, I am present in this moment. And you want to just reach your right arm up to the sky. Reach your right arm up to the sky, reach, and try and reach past your fingertips. And now let that go. And now repeat this a few times with your right arm or your left arm, where you're going to move you're starting to move, and then you're moving, and then you're moving up, and you're reaching past your fingertips. And just imagine that that's possible. I can reach past my fingertips. I'm reaching, and then I'm gonna let it go, and I'm gonna just have it be normal down to one side, right? So see if you can feel what it takes to make this movement. You want to try it just a couple of times. And you can try it at different tempos. Different directions. Reach past your fingertips. And you want to pay attention to the beginning, middle, and end. Right. And now let your arms just hang down by your side. And now imagine that your right arm is another finer arm made of energy. It's there. Your physical arm is there, and it has the same shape. Trying to see it isn't really useful. You want to imagine it. Imagine or feel that you have this finer energy arm within your physical arm. And now try to lift that energy arm first before you lift your physical arm. And then allow your physical arm to move and chase it. And then when you get to the end of the movement, then see if your energy arm can reach past your fingertips. And when it's done and it can move no further, you can just let it go. Try that again. Trying to imagine that you have your physical arm, but inside your physical arm is this energy arm, this finer version of your arm. And you want to try and imagine it, or even better, try to feel it. And that energy arm is going to move first, and then you're going to have the physical arm follow it. It's like the energy arm is moving and the physical arm is just following it along. And then as soon as the physical arm gets to the end of its length, it can't move any further, then you want to see if you can feel that energy, your energy fingers moving past your fingertips. Try it on the other side. Right, so this is something to think about. Just think about what happened, catalog it, and then we're going to come back to this. So there are 6 dynamic directions that we can move, these directions are full of information that we can use as an actor. One of my teachers studied with another teacher that was actually a student of Michael Chekhov's, and taught him this exercise. Now, if you go to a Michael Chekhov conference, it's typical that they'll start with this quite often. It's called the 6 directions. The 6 directions. And my teacher says that it is part of Michael Chekhov's daily practice. Like, apparently he wrote out a daily practice for every actor. And this 6 directions is part of the daily practice. And my teacher, whenever he acts in a play, does this exercise 38 times before he goes on stage. So it starts like this. You stand with your feet pelvis width apart in a neutral position. And what you're going to do is you're going to turn to the right, and you're going to put your right foot into a lunge. And the lunge doesn't have to be a big lunge. It's just about turning to the right with your right foot in a lunge. And your knee doesn't want to move past, your knee doesn't want to move past your ankle, so that you're just thinking, I'm sending everything right. And I'm doing this little sort of lunge. So you're going to do that. And at the same time as your lower body is turning right, your arms are going to sort of imagine that you're holding tennis balls. And your arms are going to shoot out and throw the tennis balls across the space. So I have a window over here, and I'm just imagining that I'm throwing my tennis balls out the window. So the other thing about it is your hands are going to be palms facing down as you throw. So feet pelvis width apart. I'm going to turn right. I'm going to lunge on my right, and then I'm going to throw my tennis balls at the same time. The whole thing kind of happens as one movement, and it looks like this. Yeah, and you don't have to be leaning forward or further back. You're just up, yeah, and you're on one foot. Yes, so I'm lunging out. Yes, so the whole sequence, which is 6 directions, so has 6 movements. So you're going to move to the right, and then you're going to come back to neutral. And then you're going to move to the left, come back to neutral. Then you're going to move up, go back to neutral. Then you're going to move down, go back to neutral. Then you're going to move forward, go back to neutral. And then you're going to move to the back and then come back to neutral. Yes. So when we move, so the next part of it is a turn to the left and a lunge on the left. And then our hands throw the tennis balls to the left. Yes, coming back to neutral. So let's do those first 2, turning to the right and turning to the left, starting from neutral, and then we go. Shoo, and then we're back here. And then we're going to go to the left, lunging on our left, and then back to neutral. Yeah. And then we're going to go up. And up works very similarly, but we're not lunging. Our feet just stay in place. But our hands are, let's see, our knees sort of bend, and our hands throw the tennis balls up. And we kind of lean up and look up. And the thing here is you want to make sure that you're not leaning back your head too far so you don't squish back these vertebrae. You almost want to extend up through the vertebrae as you look. So it's sort of a raised looking that really is intensified from the sternum. So up looks like this, and up. And then we're back to neutral. And then we do the same thing going down. And down is, let me see if I can, down is just this. And actually we're just going over and I'm throwing my energy out of my fingers down into the floor. So like that. Yes. And so that's down. And then forward, lunges on the right, forward. It's the same thing that we did before, to the right and to the left. It's just now on our right foot, forward, moving out. Like that. Yep. And then we come back to neutral. And then back, lunges on the left. And it just, your left, let me see if I can show you this. My feet. So you're going to be here, and then you're just going to move back like that. And so we move back into our backspace, and then we just kind of throw our arms into our backspace. And it's the same thing where we're sort of imagining that we're throwing tennis balls down and to the back. Like that. Any questions before we try it all together? Good. All right. So 6 directions. And it connects to the breath. You're neutral, and then you take a breath. And you're moving and you're turning. And you're back to neutral. And then you take a breath. And you're moving and you're turning. You're lunging on your left. And you're back to neutral. Take a breath, throwing into the up space. And back to neutral. And then take a breath, and we're throwing into our down space. And back to neutral. And then take a breath, and we're lunging on our right, and we're moving forward. And back to neutral. And then we're coming up and we're moving into our backspace. And the backspace kind of looks up a little bit when you do it. You want to be thinking, it's like you're pressing your palms into that space behind you. Yeah. And then we're back to neutral. So this exercise, there's a couple of things that Michael Chekhov encourages you to do with it. Well, there's lots of different things that you can do with it. The first is to just focus on the form of the thing and really be aware of what your body is doing. And this introduces you to an idea of his, that is that everything that we do on stage is a work of art. And art is great. Great art has some specific traits. And he calls these traits our 4 brothers. And the 4 brothers are feeling of ease, that things just kind of flow, a feeling of ease, a feeling of form. Feeling of form is that we have a very clear sense of when it starts, when we're in the middle of the thing, and when it's over, the feeling of form. And then the feeling of beauty, which doesn't really have to do with whether it's beautiful or not, but more has to do with the fact that we need to think and remember what we're doing is an art form, and it's meant to be watched. And so it might be ugly, but it has a heightened sense about it that is artistic, and we need to be aware of that. That's the feeling of beauty. And then the feeling of the whole is the last of the four brothers. And the feeling of the whole is that everything's connected and that you don't get a complete work of art without all of these other things that came before it. It's a simple way of working. And Chekhov actually encourages you to start anything that you're working on. Let's say you're in rehearsal and you are getting ready to work on a particular moment of a scene. He says, start with the feeling of ease, right? Just move through it with the feeling of ease and see what happens. And then you learn things, and then you move on to the feeling of form, and then you focus with the feeling of beauty, and then the feeling of the whole. So let's actually try this again, the 6 directions, and let's just focus on the feeling of ease. The feeling of ease. 6 directions with the feeling of ease. And remember, it's connected to the breath. And we're just gonna try it. All right, here we go. No unnecessary tension. Down. Forwards on the right. And then the back. Feeling of ease. Now let's focus on the feeling of the form. It has a clear beginning, middle, and end. This is when that idea of the life body can come in. Remember, we were talking about how we have this inner energy body inside of us. See if you can feel your inner energy body, your life body, if you will, move before your physical body moves, and then allow your physical body to catch up to it with the 6 directions. Here we go. Good. And now this time, let's focus on the feeling of beauty, that you are an artistic being. And regardless of what this structure is, you want to think about making it an artistic creation. Here we go. And now the feeling of the whole. Here we go. Nice. Nice. We can learn a lot from tempo. Practicing with tempo can help us learn a lot of things about our work. So one of the things that we can add in this exercise, and why some people call this exercise staccato legato, is that we can start with a sort of staccato tempo. Do you know what staccato means? It's a music term that means quick. Yes, yes, yes. So quick movement, sudden stops and starts. And then legato is slow with no clear stops. So let's do a version of 6 directions that's staccato, and then a version that is legato. We'll do them one right after the other. Staccato. And then right into legato from here. Slow and always continuing, but the energy needs to be going just like it did before. Right. So when my teacher does his 38 versions of that, he actually starts with staccato and goes all the way through, switching back and forth without stopping. You can see now that it can be a great exercise for just warming up, right? Our breathing is starting to, I'm starting to feel warm, right? So it's good for that. It's also good for activating that energy body, that life body, that movement, the inner movement, right? That needs to be happening for us all times on stage. So there's a great deal about what Chekhov teaches that's intangible. So what he wrote, when he wrote to the actor, he wasn't able to include a lot of the things that have to do with the spiritual stuff. So when you get an old copy of the book, it can be puzzling because a lot is missing. So I would recommend that if you are going to get the book, that you get a new version. And there's the newest version has a great introduction by one of his students, Mala Powers, who I studied with. And it has a lot more of the missing things. But it's good for you to understand that. So now, the last thing that I want to do is an imagination exercise. And I just have to go find that. So I had all of my notes put together and then, so what is happening? To the actor. To the actor. I'll put this in the. So. So imagination is a big one of the central tenets of Michael Chekhov technique. along with energy, as well as a concept that he talks about as concentration. Actually, before I go into imagination, let me just briefly touch on concentration. So concentration, when we think about concentrating on something, you know, you can kind of think about when we concentrate on something, it is not thinking hard about something. That is a mistake. When we are really concentrating on something, what we're doing is we are sending our energy out to meet it. When we are really, truly interested in something, we are attracted to it, like magnets. Have you ever had this happen? Maybe you have, where you've been taking public transportation. I lived in New York City for 10 years and would be on the subway a lot, and would have this happen to me. So imagine you're in a public space and you're surrounded by people, and all of a sudden you have the very strong sense that someone is looking at you. You feel it in your body. And then you look up and somebody, in fact, is looking at you. Have you had that happen? Yeah, most humans have. Because what has happened in that moment, sometimes it's a nefarious thing, sometimes it's some asshole, but sometimes it's just that somebody has just concentrated their attention on you because, like, your shirt reminds them of a shirt that their brother had. And they think about what's on your shirt and they send their energy out to meet it. And in doing that, they send their energy to you. And when they do that, they are concentrating their attention on you. As actors, this is what we do. We do it with our partners. We do it with the audience. And like everything with Michael Chekhov technique, there are ways that you could train yourself to do this better and to do this when you want it to happen and for however long you want it to happen. When I met the Michael Chekhov teachers for the first time in 1997, what struck me the strongest was that every single one of them was constantly concentrating their attention, sending their energy out and radiating it out into space in a way that was palpable, tangible. You go to one of these conferences and you're suddenly filled with the most interesting people in the world because they're all practicing this technique. So that's a little bit about concentration. And if we had more time, and maybe I'll teach another class sometime, I'll go into that a little bit further. But I thought that I would end with an exercise about the imagination, because these exercises work kind of like a meditation exercise. And I think in this format and in this moment, it might be a helpful thing. So imagination is one of these big central tenets, principles of Michael Chekhov technique. And actually it was this concentration and this part of imagination that I wrote my thesis on, because I was struck by the power of it. So your imagination is always working. When you're alone, after a long day, maybe driving somewhere, maybe you're walking somewhere before you go to sleep, your mind goes over images of your day, of the things that have happened to you in the past. And sometimes images slip in that maybe you don't recognize. Maybe you imagine events going another way. Maybe these visions that come into your head bring up emotions. And these images are part of what Michael Chekhov called your creative imagination. You've moved, in that moment, you've moved from a passive state of mind to a more creative one. Recently, I was driving And it was right before our latest Supreme Court justice was approved, and they were talking about how it was likely that she was going to be approved. And I had this vision of the entire Senate blowing up. I had this vision of the entire Senate blowing up, and it felt so real. And I became so like energized by it. And then I was like, oh my God, that is evil. And I just, wiped it away like I've learned how to do. But these are the moments of your creative imagination. So when I read a play for the first time, it's an exercise in my creative imagination. And when I read a play for the first time, what I do is I slowly work through the first few pages. And if images aren't conjured directly, if they're not coming to me quickly, I coax them. I ask them questions. I influence them until maybe I'm able to move through the text. Really, I want to be able to move through the text surrounded by a swirl of images. New images, old images that show me what the play could possibly look like, what could possibly sound like, could feel like if it were performed. So, for example, recently I was reading a 1992 adaptation of Orestes, which is an ancient Greek story that's been the subject of many play versions of it. And in this particular adaptation, I came across this description of the nurses that were following Orestes around all of the time. And the description, they were following him around and administering to him. And I didn't understand the way they were described, because they were described as being dressed in black. And this is a contemporary world that's being described. And I don't remember seeing nurses that are dressed in black. What does that mean? Well, so I immediately came up with an image of a nice looking lady nurse dressed in black contemporary scrubs. And I went on and started reading some more. But then I came to a description in the text that changed that, where Orestes is describing what motivated him to kill his mother. And he describes these three phantoms or furies that are dressed in black, following him around and urging him to commit murder. And I realized that the nurses were the furies. And I immediately saw a more sinister version of what the nurses needed to look like that reminded me of the weeping angels from Doctor Who, if you know what that is. But they appear to be these kind statues that turn into horrible monsters when you're not looking. So then this image replaced my first image of the nurses, and it changed the entire play for me. So this is the power of the creative imagination, which is a tool that all actors and directors use. And we learn that even though these images are malleable, and even though they can bring up big emotional responses for us sometimes, that we can't necessarily expect them to appear to us fully formed the first time they appear to us. We need to collaborate with them. We need to question them. Michael Chekhov said to ask questions of them like they're your friend, and that sometimes you might need to give them strict orders. So he encouraged artists to work on their imagination. And this is the thing that really fascinated me when I first started learning about Michael Chekhov, because he believed your imagination could be strengthened like any other muscle in the body. He developed a series of exercises for doing this. And he believed that the more you work on the creative imagination, the stronger they get, and the quicker you're able to manipulate them into clear visions of what you need for a role or what you need for a play. So when you first start working this way on this skill that all human beings have, you'll find that images might start coming to you with increasing speed, and you'll find that maybe they form and vanish and you're not able to see them as clearly as you want to. Then maybe they're coming to you too quickly. Maybe you lose them before you're able to access the feelings that they produce. But if you encourage your willpower to give the task more energy than you do your daily activities, your everyday activities, you want to bring a heightened amount of energy to the imaginative process, then you'll find before long that you can keep them. You can keep them for as long as you want. So for this exercise, find a comfortable sitting position. Close your eyes, find a straight back, energy-filled posture. Allow the neck and shoulders to fully release. Rest your arms in a way that feels comfortable, softening the hands. You can imagine a sense of melting tension, melting stress, melting thoughts. And now turn your attention to your breath. Noticing the flow of your breath, moving through your whole body. Some breaths are long, some are short. Some breaths are deep, others shallow. Each one is unique and different. You want to allow the natural breathing rhythm on the inhale, allow the breath to arrive. And on the exhale, gently let it go. As you release each breath, allow the whole body to release. With each breath out, let the tension release. Let go as though the whole body was sighing. Let everything go. Let tension go, let thoughts go, let stories go. Give all your attention to the act of letting go. Breathing in, breathing out. Let the whole body sigh. A sigh of relief, release. Let go. Now softly relax your attention and let it fall to simple recollections of impersonal events, not of your own inner emotions, real life experiences. Try to recall as many details as possible of just simple things that have happened. And concentrate on those recollections, trying not to break your flow of concentration. And as you do this, you want to train yourself to catch the very first image the moment it appears before your mind's eye. You can do it this way. Catch an image, look at it, wait until it begins to move, to change, to speak, to act on its own. Try it. Catch an image, look at it, wait until it begins to move, to change. Realize that each image has its own independent life, and don't interfere with that life. Just follow it. Now create a new image. Catch it, follow it, let it develop its independent life. Notice it in great detail. And then you can begin to interfere with it by asking questions or giving orders. You can ask it questions like, show me how you sit or how you stand, or how you go up the stairs or put on a jacket. And it's when, if the independent life becomes strong, too strong, and maybe the image turns obstinate, as sometimes happens, that you can then request it to do what you want to do in the form of an order. You can ask it to take you someplace new, or show you some other person or other people. You can ask it questions like, what do you look like when you're sad? Or what do you look like when you're happy? You can ask it to tell you a secret. You can ask the same questions or different questions, as many questions as you need until it shows you what you want to see. Now let that go. Yawn. Oh, stretch your whole body. Oh, with the yawn. And open your eyes. There you go. So I would encourage you to write down what just happened for you in this exercise, just as a way to remember, and just note for yourself what happened. The more time you spend working in this way, the more concentrated effort you spend looking at your images in this creative way with your creative imagination, the faster you can access the images, the faster you can change them, And also, and most importantly, the faster you can access the emotions that they bring up. And ultimately, if I was going to teach like the next part of this class, that's really the meat and potatoes of Michael Chekhov technique, is that it's through these things that we access our emotions. So, do you have any questions?
Yeah, actually, so with the last part, I said that I've been learning and focusing on prana
Yeah.
because I've been doing a lot of meditation recently. Is there any relation that you found anyway with imagination or the exercise we just did in meditation? Because if I'm going to be 100% honest, it turned into meditation for me.
Yeah, did it?
Meditate on the images I had, but I found that with my breath and the serenity of the moment, that it just essentially just turned into an exercise, another exercise on meditation for me.
That's yeah, well, that's good. Yeah, no, they're deeply connected, and I think that Michael Chekhov, I mean, clearly he learned these exercises from Eastern practice. Um, so, uh, you know that, and so many of the techniques that we all teach in acting classes connect to those Eastern practices and yoga techniques, meditation techniques, and all of those things. Um, I would say that what's interesting to me about this is that you could, so a way that I've done this exercise is to base it on a character. So let's say, you know, we were talking about 12th Night earlier. Let's say you're playing a character in 12th Night. You're playing Sebastian, like you were talking about, right? So you could put yourself into a meditative state and then go find Sebastian, your image of Sebastian. And you could follow Sebastian around for for lengths of time, asking questions, finding out things about Sebastian. And what's great about this is that it kind of releases you from this thing that happens where you could be like, I'm not Sebastian, you know? And you can sort of be okay with that. And ultimately, Michael Chekhov has an exercise that I find incredibly fascinating that's called incorporating the image, where you go find the image of Sebastian and then you take it inside your body. And you know, play around with the way Sebastian moves and letting Sebastian, that image of Sebastian's movement, move your life body and see what happens in that way. But another way that you can use these exercises is just to think about, like, if you are, say you're working on a scene and you just can't quite connect to what the character wants in this moment or something like that. You could go find your image of the character and say, what are you doing in this scene? You know, why do you want to do this particular thing so badly? And see what your imagination says. Ultimately, when you get yourself into that meditative state, it can bring you great power, and you can come up with ideas for characters that you never would have done had you not put yourself in that meditative, you know, subconscious place.
Mhm. Nice.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, this is, I mean, not really in relation to this, but I don't know if you've said, do you offer any training in Chekhov? I mean, pre and post COVID, I guess. I understand that this is kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, this is where, well, I teach at Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, and I teach this stuff with my students. But, you know, I've been talking with OSP about doing something like this for a long time, and I know there's a lot of interest. And so if there is interest in doing something like that, we could talk more about what that would look like. Because, like, I could do a 6-day training will tell you everything that you need to know. You could walk away from a 6-day training and really feel like you have a very clear sense of what the system is. So we could talk about something like that.
Well, this is me verbalizing my interest.
Excellent. Well, I'll talk to them about that.
Hey guys, I caught the end of that, what you were just saying.
Mhm.
And that sounds great. Yeah, let's definitely talk more about that.
Awesome.
I was just hopping in because it's 8:30, and I just wanted to, guess, gently wrap it up this evening. You're welcome to have any last minute questions or whatever, but I was just going to say thank you, Laura, for doing this. I have been listening to most of it, and this has actually been really fascinating. I'm so glad that we got this on record.
Oh,
We're going
good.
to post these available for future sessions, and hopefully, like you guys were just saying, we can do maybe we can do an intensive. So I think that'd
Yeah,
be great.
yeah. I would love that, because there's so much more. I guess I would just leave you with this idea. Remember that these people, like Michael Chekhov, were considered to be so subversive in the way they made art that they were considered enemies of the state. I think we can forget why we do what we do, but plays are really, really powerful. And in making plays, we have a great power to change our world and our lives. So maybe we won't need to bring a revolution, but we certainly can. We can access the power of our art form in ways that we maybe don't allow ourselves to think about. So,
Right on.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all.
Mhm.
Thank you.